Question period. I recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, this tired and out-of-touch government isn't listening to what matters most to Saskatchewan people. That's right. Now, this Premier has the worst job creation record in the country. 6,000 jobs lost last month, unemployment is up, and thousands are giving up on finding a job altogether. Mr. Speaker, people in this province are struggling, yet this Premier offers zero relief. Why won't the Premier give families struggling in this province a break and suspend his fuel tax?
Recognize the Premier.
Speaker, the fuel tax we have in Saskatchewan today is precisely the same fuel tax that was charged each and every day under the NDP administration. Mr. Speaker, the difference being today is that all of those dollars are invested right back into our highways, which under the NDP they were not, Mr. Speaker. That's the difference between the government we have today and the government we had previously, Mr. Speaker. With respect to jobs, the February numbers are jobs in Saskatchewan are up 10,500. That shouldn't be too hard to figure out, Mr. Speaker. With that has attracted over 29,000 people to move to Saskatchewan this past year, Mr. Speaker. Those are families that are making their home in community after community across Saskatchewan. And I would point the opposition to the Deloitte quote that was read in a minute ago. The economy of Saskatchewan is poised for relatively strong performance this year compared to the rest of the country. We're seeing strong investment in the province, driven by sizable investments in the potash industry. You couple this strength with solid population gains and a relatively low household debt burdens, and Saskatchewan's economy is poised to grow 1.4% this year and 3.1% next year, Mr. Speaker. End of quote.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, this is a Premier failing to deliver on the cost of living and failing to deliver when it comes to health care. And we see that record of failure yet again today, with this government firing off yet another press release about the Regina Urgent Care Centre. Mr. Speaker, predictably clapping for themselves, another photo op, Mr. Speaker, but they have zero plan to actually staff that centre. Mr. Speaker, with chronic short staffing and burnout at both the General and the Pasqua hospitals, what is this Premier's plan to actually staff that urgent care centre?
Recognize the Premier.
We have the Health Human Resource Plan, the most ambitious Health Human Resource Plan in the nation of Canada, Mr. Speaker, showing successes with the hiring of nurses from not only Canadian graduates, but afar, Mr. Speaker, starting to drive down our surgical wait lists across the Saskatchewan Health Authority. The Saskatchewan Health Authority understands that plan is well funded with over $100 million put behind it, Mr. Speaker. It's showing successes across the Saskatchewan Health Authority, and it's going to be successful in hiring the more than 100 staff that are going to house that first-of-its-kind innovative urgent care centre in Regina.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, that Premier's record has 1 in 6 people in this province without a family doctor, and a Premier who is clearly not listening to healthcare workers. They're burning out and they're leaving their professions because this tired and out-of-touch government refuses to listen. Mr. Speaker, the Premier can't even say yes to a nursing task force that's been called for by the nurses. Mr. Speaker, as Shannon Arel-Bast recently said when she visited her legislature, and I quote, "You can put in infrastructure, you can put in machines, you can put in whatever you want, but people have to operate these in order to be well." Mr. Speaker, when is the Premier going to start listening to healthcare workers so that the people of this province can get the care that they need?
Recognize the Premier.
You need a balance, Mr. Speaker, of infrastructure. You need people. You need training opportunities for those people, Mr. Speaker. All of that is only available through a strong, growing, and vibrant economy, Mr. Speaker, of which this party, this government, has been focused on for 17 years now, unlike the members opposite when they had the opportunity with the worst investment rate in Canada, the worst jobs rate in Canada, and a population that actually went down 700 people over the course of 16 years. Mr. Speaker, the investment in the urgent care centre is step one. The investment in the people that are... that are going to offer the services within that centre, Mr. Speaker, is step 2. And 3, Mr. Speaker, and some of the most important step is the services that are actually going to be delivered to families, whether that be urgent care services, Mr. Speaker, filling a gap in our healthcare system between making an appointment with your primary care physician and being in the emergency department, Mr. Speaker, filling that gap, or secondarily, Mr. Speaker, providing access for those in our communities and our families that might be having a mental health crisis or unfortunately have entered a life of addictions, Mr. Speaker. And we're backing up that access with 500 recovery beds, Mr. Speaker. We're backing up that access with hiring mental health and addictions professionals across the board, Mr. Speaker. And we're backing up all of that with the most ambitious health human resource plan in the nation of Canada.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Read the quote again. You're not going to get there unless you start listening to healthcare workers in this province. People in this province cannot get the care that they need because of this tired and out-of-touch government. Mr. Speaker, let's look at surgical waits. New numbers show that Saskatchewan is still dead last when it comes to knee and hip replacement surgery. Mr. Speaker, Saskatchewan has been dead last for almost as long as that Premier has held that seat. Is it acceptable, Mr. Speaker, to that Premier that people in this province are waiting longer than any other province in the country for knee and hip surgeries?
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to begin by thanking our surgical teams across this province who are helping us to reduce the surgical wait times across Saskatchewan and reduce those waits for patients right across Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker. In last year's budget, in the new budget, we are making record investments into surgical care, and that is we're only able to do that, Mr. Speaker, as a result of a strong and growing and vibrant economy here, so we can invest over $670 million into surgical procedures across this province, making sure that patients are getting the hip surgeries that they need, getting the knee surgeries that they need. We still have work to do, Mr. Speaker, but we have a target to reduce those wait times. We're going to hit that target. We're going to continue to make progress when it comes to surgeries in Saskatchewan.
Hear, hear.
Recognize the member from Regina Walsh Acres.
I'm curious to know, Mr. Speaker, when that target's going to be hit. The fact is that we have been dead last in Canada every single year since 2019. Nearly every year since that Premier took office, Saskatchewan people have been waiting longer than any other province. Waiting for surgery severely lowers the quality of life for patients. Does the minister think it is acceptable that Saskatchewan people have to wait longer for this life-changing surgery than everywhere else in Canada?
Hear, hear. Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said previously, we recognize that there's still more work to do to reduce the surgical wait times, to make sure that people across this province get the surgeries that they need as quickly as possible. And we are making advancements, Mr. Speaker, and progress when it comes to that. Current average wait time for hip replacement is now 176 days, which is significantly lower than previously reported targets and numbers reported by CIHI. It's lower than the pre-pandemic wait times for knee surgeries. Mr. Speaker, as of December 31st of this past year, over 16,000 orthopedic surgeries were completed in the province, including over 5,300 hip and knee surgeries. We are on track, Mr. Speaker, to complete the most orthopedic surgeries ever in the province's history, thanks to the great work of our surgical teams across this province. We're going to continue to support them with dollars and other supports necessary to make sure they can do the work necessary to support patients right across this province, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member from Regina Walsh Acres.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These long wait times for life-changing surgeries are unacceptable. The median wait for hip replacements was 232 days, Mr. Speaker, but 10% of patients were forced to wait more than 619 days or more. How does the minister defend that? Why should anyone in Saskatchewan have to wait in pain for almost 2 years before they can get a hip replacement that they need?
Hear, hear.
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said previously, we continue to make record investments into our surgical program as a result of a strong and growing and vibrant economy that allows us to make these very strategic key investments into healthcare, Mr. Speaker. And these are investments that were not happening under the previous government when they had the opportunity to serve the people of this province. We're going to continue to do this work, Mr. Speaker. Our government has done over 1,000 more hip replacement surgeries that were done in the entire fiscal year of 2006-2007, Mr. Speaker. We have a growing province, more people in Saskatchewan than ever before, a growing population, and a demographic that is accessing our healthcare system more than ever before, and one that this government is going to continue to support people right across this province, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. Recognize the member from Regina Wall Shakers.
Mr. Speaker, those are hollow words for Saskatchewan people sitting in pain right now. The wait times for hip surgeries are unacceptable, but for knees, Mr. Speaker, they're even longer. 318 days was the median wait time for knee replacements, but some people waited 716 days or more. Now, these aren't just numbers. These are Saskatchewan people. People who are waiting in pain for surgeries that should have been delivered months ago. Does the minister think it's acceptable for anyone in this province to have to wait more than 700 days to get a knee replacement?
Hear, hear. Recognize the Minister of Health.
Here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Current average wait times for knee replacement is 309 days, which is lower than the wait time reported by CIHI in some recent reports, Mr. Speaker. As I said previously, over 16,500 orthopedic procedures have been completed in this province, including 5,300 hip and knee replacements. Mr. Speaker, just specific to knee surgeries, we have already completed the most knee replacement surgeries in this province's history, over 3,700 knee surgeries, thanks to the great work being done by our surgical teams across this province, Mr. Speaker, who we meet with on a regular basis to talk to surgeons, to talk to the head of surgery, and those that are working in our operating rooms, nurses, and other associated healthcare professionals, Mr. Speaker, are going to continue to work on these targets, to reduce those waits, and make sure that people can get the care that they need.
Recognize the member from Regina Wall Shakers.
If I understand correctly, Mr. Speaker, the minister is saying that the wait is 9 days lower than I was reporting. Big progress there, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Sask Party likes to talk about opening buildings or about record spending in healthcare, but people don't need a press release or a photo op. They need quick access to healthcare. They need results. And this tired and out-of-touch government, by the numbers, is failing to deliver those results failing badly. People in BC are waiting half as long for hip and knee replacements. Why does the minister think it's okay for people in BC to have better access to health care than people here at home?
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite might want to be cautious about referring to BC, because when it comes to breast cancer care, the province of BC, New Democrat BC, is sending patients out of province. As a matter of fact, they're also sending patients, when it comes to breast care, to Washington State, Mr. Speaker, for their care. That's what the province of BC is doing. Now, Mr. Speaker, let's remember as well, we as a government are working to provide all sorts of options for patients in this province, reducing the surgical wait times, investing in surgeries here in Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker, and providing patients with the opportunity to, as a result of contracting some surgeries through private clinics in Calgary, Mr. Speaker. That is another option, Mr. Speaker, and we have people across this province that are accepting those offers when it comes to surgeries and the opportunity to get hip replacements in other provinces, Mr. Speaker. Again, we're going to continue to invest in making sure that we have record investments into surgical wait times, Mr. Speaker. And again, I don't know what the NDP's plan is. We still haven't seen it, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member for Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last year, the former Minister of Health announced his big fix to our worst in the nation knee and hip replacement wait times, a plan to send 20 patients a month out of province to a private clinic in Calgary. This is what we see over and over from this Sask Party government. They drive our public health care system into the ground, then sign a private deal with a Sask Party donor to fix the mess they've created. Meanwhile, wait times keep going up and up. Why does the Sask Party always find a way to help their friends and donors get ahead while Saskatchewan people wait longer and longer?
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is one of several options that we have presented to patients as we work to reduce the surgical wait times. I'm going to read a quote, Mr. Speaker, from an individual who wrote into the office in February who says, and I quote, "I want to share with you that last month I had the opportunity to go to Calgary for hip replacement surgery as part of the provincial initiative to address the long wait list. It has been a game changer for me as my condition was deteriorating quickly, and on the wait list it would have meant another year until surgery. I'm confident if that had been my path, I would have ended up on sick leave, Mr. Speaker, unable to work while waiting for surgery. Instead, I'm recovering quickly and expect to be back to work soon. I'm almost pain-free, starting to be active again, and regaining strength." Close the quote, Mr. Speaker. Again, we are making significant investments, record investments into our surgical program here in Saskatchewan, but also exploring all options to give patients access to surgeries they need while we continue to cut that wait list down, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Mr. Speaker, facts are facts, and this private Calgary-based company has donated more than $14,000 to this Sask Party since 2016. What did they get in exchange, Mr. Speaker? A $6 million deal for private hip and knee replacements, a $2 million sweetheart deal to provide basic mammogram services at 10 times the cost to Saskatchewan taxpayers. That's what they got, Mr. Speaker. The only people who are benefiting from the Sask Party's privatization schemes are Sask Party donors. Saskatchewan people are left waiting longer and longer. Why won't the Sask Party fix our public health care system and get people the care they need now?
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know the members opposite. We know they can't stand anything that's outside of the box thinking. They can't stand to look at anything that might be involved with a privately operated but publicly funded health care, Mr. Speaker. And there are people that are benefiting. I'll continue with the quote from the individual who wrote into our office who said, furthermore, quote, "I want you to know this initiative has had a significant impact on my life, and I am grateful I had the opportunity to go to Calgary. I hope you're able to continue this strategy as it is helping people get their health and get their lives back. I work in health, and I know there are many challenges in providing care and think it's important that you hear about a success story." Close the quote, Mr. Speaker. That's from a healthcare worker here in Saskatchewan who's in support of this initiative to give people the option to get surgeries next door.
Recognize the member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Mr. Speaker, this is the Sask Party's MO. Step 1, neglect the public service and run it into the ground. Step 2, wait for the public to get frustrated with the service. Step 3, privatize the service to their friends. Step 4, rake in the donations while their friends and insiders get rich. That's the Sask Party's privatization playbook, and it's not working. When will the Sask Party realize that Saskatchewan people are the ones paying the price for their healthcare privatization schemes?
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Here's the opposition's playbook. Number 1, give up on Saskatchewan. Drive people out of this province. Reduce the population. Number 2, close hospitals. Close 52 rural hospitals across this province, Mr. Speaker. Fire doctors. Fire nurses. Shut down training programs. For example, for registered psychiatric nurses. Heaven forbid we would have some of those being trained in our province, Mr. Speaker. That's their plan. Here's what the playbook of this government is. Continue to have faith in the people of this province. To make record investments into health care. $7.6 billion in this year's budget, Mr. Speaker, into health care. $670 million alone into the surgical program, an increase of $3.5 million into surgeries in this year's budget, Mr. Speaker, to meet the increasing demand, Mr. Speaker. This is a growing province, one that we are proud of, one that the people of this province are proud of. It'd be nice for once if the NDP were actually proud of Saskatchewan.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon Eastview.
Mr. Speaker, under this tired and out-of-touch government, we have the highest rates of childhood poverty in the country. That's right. 57% of families struggle to pay for groceries. Parents need some help when it comes to making sure every kid has access to safe and healthy food. That's right. The federal government has announced a plan for a national school lunch program. Will the Sask Party get a deal with the feds to help parents and kids get access to healthy food?
Hear, hear. Recognize the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we spoke about this issue for a little bit of time at estimates yesterday evening in this chamber, Mr. Speaker, and I reminded that member in particular that the province already funds a child nutrition program here in the province to the tune of about $2.7 million a year, Mr. Speaker. A slight increase again, Mr. Speaker. Over 5.3 million meals were provided to students in our education system around the province, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to working with the federal government, there's examples where us as a provincial government have worked with the federal government when it's in the best interests of Saskatchewan. Right. We will review what the federal government's recent announcement, ensure that it's best for Saskatchewan kids, it's best for Saskatchewan schools and families, Mr. Speaker, before we enter into any agreement with the federal government. Thank you.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon Eastview.
Mr. Speaker, the fact is that there is a serious need to help families in our province today with access to healthy food. We lead the country in child poverty, and 57% of families are struggling to put food on the table. But you wouldn't know that from listening to this tired and out-of-touch government. Will the minister work with the feds and get a deal for Saskatchewan, yes or no?
Hear, hear. Recognize the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as per usual from this federal government, an announcement comes out with zero information, Mr. Speaker. This is something that the federal government has talked about off and on over the last several years, but an announcement comes out in recent days and weeks with no information and no guidance for provinces and no consultation with provinces either, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, Mr. Speaker, we want to work with the school divisions around the province to ensure that students are supported. As I said, Mr. Speaker, we will work with the federal government to understand the information around this announcement. If it's in the best interest of Saskatchewan kids and families, absolutely, we will enter an agreement that makes sense for Saskatchewan.
Recognize a member from Saskatoon Eastview.
Mr. Speaker, it's absolutely important to stand up to the federal government when they're on the wrong track, but it's also important to get a deal done when it's in the best interest of Saskatchewan people. Federal funding for a school lunch program will go a long way to reducing child poverty and helping families with the cost of living, and it's something Saskatchewan school boards are also asking for. Why won't that Sask Party work with the feds, get a deal done on a universal school nutrition program?
Recognize the Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, let's just review what that member opposite and the NDP are asking us to do as government. They're asking us to enter an agreement when we have no information from the federal government. There's no understanding of what the announcement even is, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I've indicated before, there's examples where our provincial government has worked with the federal government collaboratively in the best interests of Saskatchewan people. Once we can see what is on paper and ensure that it's in the best interest of Saskatchewan people, we'll do the same here with the child nutrition program. Thank you.
Recognize a member from Saskatoon Eastview.
Mr. Speaker, this government leads a province with the highest rates of childhood poverty in the country, among the highest rates of children using the food bank in the entire country. So a solution is before this minister, and yes, is coming from the federal government. Will he pick up the phone today and call that federal minister to get details so we can get a deal done so Saskatchewan children can get the nutritious food that they need and deserve at school in Saskatchewan?
Hear, hear. Recognize the Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, this announcement from the federal government is in a federal budget that hasn't even been announced yet, Mr. Speaker. When that budget is released and we can receive more information, we'll absolutely enter into discussions. Thank you.
Recognize a member from Saskatoon Centre.
Miigwech, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, every day this year, a family has lost a loved one to overdose. 113 people lost to this crisis since January 1st of this year. Overdose impacts everyone in this province. However, it disproportionately impacts Indigenous people and our communities. 75% of overdose deaths this year have been an Indigenous person, Mr. Speaker. when Indigenous people only make up 17% of the population. This is an area where Indigenous people are being failed by this government. When will this minister take ownership of this wrong and implement an evidence-based plan that would save Indigenous lives?
Hear, hear, hear.
Recognize the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, every loss of life due to an overdose is a tragedy. That doesn't matter what community they come from, Mr. Speaker, or what age they are. Every loss of life is a tragedy, and this government takes that very seriously. And that's why we are actively working to expand capacity of our treatment facilities across the province, making it easier for individuals to access those treatment facilities and wrapping supports around them through recovery-oriented systems of care. Those facilities, Mr. Speaker, the 500 spaces that we are quickly expanding to, are appearing in every corner of our province, Mr. Speaker, including Poundmakers Lodge, which is located in North Battleford, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to thank the member for her support of that facility, Mr. Speaker, when she said to CTV News, and I quote, "This treatment centre is from an Indigenous perspective, and as a critic for First Nations and Métis relations, it's important for me to show support for programming that is being developed here in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan definitely needs this." Thank you, Mr. Speaker.